everyone and welcome back to my channel. So today I'm going to be filming the watercolour background that I've done in 2 or 3 colouring pages, and a couple of people have asked for me to do a tutorial. Now I've picked probably the easiest page that I could possibly, because I wanted this to be just about the background. Now I could have picked a page that was looking like this and then used masking fluid to protect the actual image itself, but that would take me a long time, and this tutorial is just about the background. So I am gonna put masking fluid all over the little bumblebee, but then that will just protect it from getting any paint on it. So let's dive straight in. Right, so get your masking tape ready. Now the masking tape that I use is the Uni Bond. Now I'm gonna just pop this on my pants just to take some of the tackiness off. Now if I wasn't doing this for a video I wouldn't be worrying about this side, but if you're doing it in a colouring book and you want to protect the other side of the page, then I would highly suggest popping a little bit of masking tape down just to protect the next page. Oh, I've got a paintbrush running off. And then what you want to do is either put some spare sheets of paper behind this one or some plastic sheets. Now I will link these down below. They're just some thin pieces of plastic that I purchased off Amazon. Let's see if I can find the other ones. I use them very frequently, as you can see. I'm just going to pop these behind this page. I'm coming down with a little bit of a cold, so I do apologise for my voice. So yeah, thanks Isabel. So we can use move that masking tape out of the way now. Now these are the 4 main colours that I'm going to be using. Now the palette that I've made myself. I've got a mixture between Daniel Smith, the white, is it white? White Nights watercolours, the Faber-Castell Professional watercolours, and the watercolour Paul Rubens in a tube that I've transferred into a pan. So as long as they're very similar colours, so you can choose your own colour palette. And this is I think it's is it porcelain? Let me just double check. I don't think it's porcelain, it can't be. It doesn't say, but it's a non-porous surface, and this was, oh, I've mixed all my paint together. This was very cheap off in just a local paint store. I'm not too worried about that because the colours are going to mix together anyway. So the first step that you want to do is anything that you want to save on the page, use masking fluid. Now I do use these ones, these little pens, but I have got a different masking fluid coming today. Unfortunately it's not here for me to try in this video, but with these you just make sure you shake the pen and then it's just like a pumping mechanism, push down and the liquid comes out. I will speed this little section up because it might get a bit tedious, because it does take me a little while to do this. I do take my time. So that is all the masking fluid down. Now you've seen I've not used anything else on the page yet. I'm not priming it with gesso or anything. I found that the paper, it just takes it well. So make sure that you've got your glass of clean water. Now I'm using a oval wash brush, and it is quite large, this brush. And I want to put a thin wash of water on and let that soak into the paper and leave it for a couple of minutes before we even put any paint on. So just all over. I thought this would be the perfect page to do, to show off this sort of background. And then I wasn't sat here forever and a day masking the actual image itself. This is a very good brush for getting lots of water down quickly. I was using the quill brush and that's still good, but I found that this one is better, and I bought this one from my local art store. Hobbycraft. It wasn't cheap, I think it was about £12 or £13 this one. But I don't think that's too expensive for watercolour brushes, because I know that you can pay a lot of money for them. So I'll try and show you on a different angle how much water I'm actually putting down here, because I know that it's difficult seeing on camera. Just make sure that I've got all the edges and all the corners. So I'm going to bring you down and show you just a different angle. So you can just about see that it's glistening. There is no pooling on the page. It's just a very thin wash of water. So while the paper is still wet, I'm going to go ahead and add the first layer. Now this is in layers, this is how I did it. And it's a very, very watered down paint that I'm using. And the way that I did it, I might even have to switch to a bigger brush. I am going to do actually. I'm going to switch to the quill brush. So I'm going to make sure that that's nice and wet. And I've just got an old tea towel that I use to get the excess off. And let's pick up that paint. This is just the base layer to get something down, and you have to let the paper dry in between each layer. Adding a little bit of yellow as well. I mean, you can use your heat gun, but it might warp your paper. But if it does, iron it. If it bothers you, you can always iron your paper. All you need to do is put a clean tea towel on top, iron the page on a lower setting on your iron. I've just picked up a little bit of pigment that was already on the plastic. Let's make sure we get all of the bottom. Yeah, so if you just iron it on the low setting, your page will be absolutely fine. I've done it quite a few times now actually. But I am just going to let that completely dry, wet it again, and then just go over with my let's see it layer. And you do have to have a little bit of patience. By all means use your hairdryer, but if you're like me, I'll go off and do a couple of jobs and come back when it's dry. So I'm happy now with how dry that is, and my palette is ever so slightly dried too. So what I'm going to do is just spray some of the colours directly, because I'm going to go straight into the pan. I'm going to do more colours than I know that I'll use, but I'd rather have them the ready to go. So back in again, just with the oval brush, and wet the surface again. Now I don't know about you, but I just find this so relaxing. I'm dipping my toes into watercolour, and because I'm learning how to do, I'm trying my best to do birds, animals, and my dogs are talking to each other. And some of them tricks and tips that I've learned are rubbing off onto my colouring books, which I think is super cool. So, pick my colour up again with the quill brush. I'm just using the colours that are on my palette. And instead of doing a wash all over, I just want to pull the colour from the top to the bottom, leaving some gaps, just like this. It's very, very random. This is how I did it. I just popped the colour where I thought it looked best, and then into the orangey red. I think it is vermilion, this colour, I do believe. And the reason that I've gone for oranges and yellows, that sort of thing, is purely because of the bumblebee. But it's your page, you can pick what colours you want. Back in with the orange. Now, with a smaller brush, like this, I'm going to wet that. I'm going to bring the palette over so I can actually show you. And this is the Arteza palette. It's just an empty palette that I've created But I wish I could take these off. That's the only thing, so it would make it easier for me to hold. So I'm going directly into the pan. Now this one is the Daniel Smith colour, and these are super pigmented, so I have to be careful how much I'm putting down. But it's the same technique as what I've just done, it's just with a finer brush. Some areas I'll put a lot more colour, other areas I won't put much in with the red, just a tiny bit of this. I just want to build these colours up. I don't want to splash a load of colour down and then not like what I've done. So I'm just going to build these colours up. And you can see, because the paper was wet, the colours are going to bleed into each other beautifully. A little bit more of the red. And you can work from the middle as well and bring the colour out like that. You don't have to start from the top. It's entirely up to you the way that you want to do it. And some of the brown. And this will carry on bleeding into each other until it's nearly dry. And it creates a beautiful effect. But we will do some watercolour blooms as well. I want the smallest amount of black, just in a couple of areas. In the centre, in between the yellow. I do want to add a little bit more yellow. So, here we go. Right, now I'm going to leave that to dry completely again, and then we'll come back and do probably the final layer, and that's when I'll add my different watercolour effects before it dries. So that will probably take about 15 minutes to half an hour, because the paper is quite wet now. I'm not going to move it just in case I fiddle with the colours too much, but we'll be right back. Right, so we're on to hopefully the last layer. Now I think with the last layer I'm going to dry it with the heat gun just to show you what it's like. And if I have to iron it, I will iron it on camera just to show you as well. But we'll see how we go. So the exact same process again. Now the edges I want to darken up. All the edges. I want to keep the middle the brightest. So remove this from the water. That would have been a help. Now the water is slightly tinted in colour, but because it's a similar colour to what's already on the page, I'm not too worried. So let's wet all this again. Just the same as last time. And as long as you've left it to dry long enough, the paint that is already down shouldn't reactivate too much. It might do ever so slightly, but it shouldn't be too bad. To make sure I get right into these edges, because I do want to make this area quite dark. So back into the palette. I'm going to put it down this time and make it my life a lot easier. So into the orange, and I'm going to be quite brave now with the colours that I'm putting down, and use different brushes. And then when it's almost dry, pop some clean water down to make them watercolour blooms. So I'll switch my brush again, go in with the red. I do want to do this a little bit quicker as well, before the paint, the water starts drying too much. Let's just get this down. Bit more red down here. Bring it up. Dampen my brush again, and I do want a little bit of red coming from the B as well into the orange, and from the top. And you're just gradually making it darker, however you like it. That probably needs wetting a little bit more. Now the paper in the middle here, I mustn't have put enough water down because it is slightly drier than the rest. Just make sure I work a little bit quicker. And the black on all of the corners, I think. I do want to make the edges quite dark. I'm going to put a bit of black on the quill brush as well, dampen that a little bit more. Can you see how much it's bleeding there now? I love that effect. Clean the quill brush off and let's dip into the brown. It's a little bit like a fire scene, this, isn't it? Into the red. And I think I'm going to put a touch more black and then I'll be happy with that. And then we can start the drying process. Right, so put both of my brushes just in the water. Let's move this palette out of the way. Just make sure that these brushes are clean because I do need the brush again in a little bit. Well, I've just got a heat tool here. Now I do switch it up. I use the heat tool and I use just a normal hairdryer. It depends what mood I'm in and depends which one I've got to hand. So let's start drying this. Now because there is the plastic sheets behind, I don't want to hold it right next to the paper because it's going to burn and misshapen the plastic sheets. So I'm going to hold it quite far back. I'll fast forward this bit again because it might take me a few minutes because I'm going to take my time in doing this. While some parts are drying really nicely, you see these here, it's still quite damp at the bottom. Get your brush with just some water on. It's very temperamental with me, this, whether it works or not, so bear with me. And I'm just putting a couple of droplets of water just to disturb that pigment that's already down. Sometimes this works beautifully, it depends on the paper, sometimes it depends on the paint that I'm using. So let's just have a little play and see. And you just want to put enough down just that the pigment starts moving. It's working beautifully there, just there at the top. If I move the paper, I'm going to show you, without the glare though, can you see the pigment moving now? So that is working. So back to the heat gun. I don't want to put too many watercolour blooms because I don't know how it's going to turn out. So yeah, back to the heat gun. So I'm pretty sure that we're all dry there now. Now because I use the heat gun, if I just lift it up ever so slightly, you can see, and I've made a mess on the other side, but luckily there's nothing on that side, but this page is perfectly fine. Because I've used the heat gun, it's made it bend terribly, so I am going to use the iron, but before we do that we need to take this masking tape and the masking fluid off. So this is the problem that I'm having with the masking tape, you see, and I've even put it on my clothes, but luckily it's not too bad because it's the front of the book. But you see, I need to find a better masking tape. Luckily, that's just that front piece, we should be alright. Now, I've had mixed feelings about this thing, and this is called Mask Away. It was super cheap off Amazon, it was about £2.50. And the idea behind it is you rub it on, and it takes the masking fluid off. Now, it's very hit and miss whether this sometimes, it works beautifully, but sometimes it takes the paper off with it. So I'm going to try with my finger first, and if that doesn't work I will use that. I just want to try my finger first, and I will bring you in closer. And it is getting it off, but it's leaving a lot of bits. I am going to use this, but I'm going to be really careful and just take my time. And I've missed some of the background there. Not to worry. So I'm really taking my time here. I think I might have even had, no, I thought I had paint on my fingers and I haven't. But it is taking it off. Let's switch sides. Let's work on the wings. So it seems to be alright in this one. There's a couple of bits that I've missed. Let's get these legs. Turn it around. But considering how many layers of paint that I put on, I think it's done a good job at protecting the white of the paper. Switch round again and do this last wing. So that's Mr. Bumblebee freed. So yeah, I think I'm going to iron it just to get rid of that nasty crease there. And then with the other one, I went over the top with some Paul Rubens. I don't want to do that with this page. I do want to keep it all matte. But you could pop anything over the top of this just to make it a little bit extra special. So let's go and get the iron. Now that my iron's all nice and hot, it's on a low to medium setting. I'm just using an old tea towel. An old stained tea towel, and this is 100% cotton, this tea towel. It's only very thin. I'm just going to make sure that all of the edges are flat because I don't want to create any creases. And just go over the top with the iron. Just making sure I'm getting these edges because they were the worst that were affected. So let's check on that now. I've got wires and everything everywhere. So that's a lot better. I lift the page up, but there's still a bit of a kink, so I'm going to work on that, and then at the bottom as well. Hold it there for a couple of seconds. It will flatten out as well. If you're keeping your boots on a boot shelf and they're in between others, it will flatten out. But this is just to help a little bit. Let's try that now. Yep, and I'm quite happy with that. That's flat enough for me. There's a tiny bit of a kink there, but I don't want to go too far into the spine, and that will flatten out over time. So let me just unplug this, it's dangerous. And that is how I do the watercolour background. Now it does turn out different every single time. It depends what paper, what paint, what technique, what colour, and what is on the colouring page, how it turns out basically. I will show you from another Hanna Karlzon book, one that I finished that turned out completely different to this. I was searching through all my bookshelf then, and it was in my finished pages trolley because I have finished a page. So I'll just move this to one side. But there is 2 or 3 that I've done in this book. That's the first one, check. So this is one that I did. But with this one, I didn't dilute, towards the end, the last layer, I didn't dilute the paint nowhere near as much as I did with this one. And I just went straight from the palette. And there was barely any, I think it's called dry painting. That's these effects. And then the shiny bits that you can see is that chrome pen. But But yeah, it all depends on the technique, the paper and the colours. And then this technique is very, very similar to this one. That is how I created that one, but that is actually all coloured in and finished. But I can do another tutorial which is more based around this one. But like I said, that one did take me a lot longer and you have to have a lot of patience for this. I didn't iron this page, and as you can see, it is perfectly fine, and there was a lot of paint on that page. Even the image himself is watercolour paint. But yeah, I hope that you found this helpful. I'm still learning how to do all these different effects myself, but I thought it'd be nice to share what I'm learning along the way. I hope you have a nice day. Please leave me a like if you did like this video, or it did help you, or you got some ideas. Please do like the video, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!